Oh, this is interesting because you sort of gave me the indication, like, yeah, correct on the last video, but I said in an earlier one, like, well, you keep doing the drilling thing, and I thought, like, what, the sort of drilling noise, and then there was something else you showed me with a drill. So, well, okay, I mean, I sort of tried to think of what it meant in the context of Iran and everything, but I mean, in the context of what we just said, here's what very few people know. They don't. I mean, because it's all buried in, like, called a bunch of things. People lied to about this so badly in the 90s, and there's nothing to do. They're still running those ridiculous documentaries. I'm referring to Oklahoma City. Like, Timothy McVeigh had served in the first Gulf War, okay? And I'm saying when he was, back in, there was no, one of the things that there weren't many jobs around at the time he came back. He was living with his parents. He was one of many people who, in Clinton's internal security forces, I mentioned in the other one, when they started, like, going after innocent people, like, minding their own business. The first being these people living in a cabin, wanted to be left alone, but, were peaceful. Okay, Karen shot the wife in the throat, and all that, and I talked about that. This happened in Idaho. Peaceful people. They were trying to get an informant to get info on the Aryan nations, even though those people weren't involved in it, didn't think anything of it. Matter of fact, they were really offended. They went and said us. They called it this nonsense about supremacism, thinking you're better than someone because your race is ridiculous. But there were these, like, peaceful people, living, who were peaceful and thought the Aryan nations were ridiculous. Yeah, they wanted an informant. Then when they couldn't get their way, they surrounded the cabin and killed the wife. Okay, then came the Clinton's internal security forces, came after these people that, in a religious community. That's the Davidians, where the first African American graduate of Harvard Divinity School was burned to death by these people, by the internal security forces. Okay, well, here's the thing: tons of people from the area, like in both cases, came there with binoculars to see what the heck was going on. They were very frightened. Okay, these are the same people that came, to both trials with the same signs: ATF shot first and all that. But here's the thing: one of the people that showed up there, was Timothy McVeigh. This person had just come back from the first. He'd been in the military. He was deployed in the first Gulf War, and he came back, believed the war was wrong, and that it was about oil. Like a lot of people in the country said, this is only over oil. Okay, that is to say, his point of view about that is what, like, the sort of mainstream would call, like, well, a left wing perspective. The person is later painted as part of the far right wing, because people are, like, totally deal this left right things are fiction. But okay, he was someone who was very concerned, thought the war was about oil. He'd been over in the Middle East. While he's back living in America, he sees that whoever's in control of the government, that Clinton, is sending the internal security forces at the peaceful Christian communities and covering it up in the media by saying they're going after far right-wing groups and that the people there are racist and all this stuff. Those are all lies. I mean, you call them whatever you want. These are like, Protestant groups where people want to be left alone, live in a cabin, read the Bible. Okay, so yeah, having come back from the first Gulf War and believing that the war was only over oil, and like a lot of people feel like these wars are over oil, we should have no business in the Middle East. And he was a person that felt that way, but he also had military training. And when he saw what they'd done that they were sending the internal security forces after peaceful people and killing them, burning them to death in one case. I love that it's amazing that they covered that up as racism when it was a totally interracial community living there, the Davidians. But, like, here's the thing, right? That he felt he had to do something, okay? And then he, he was, the main person that drove a truck bomb up to the federal building in Oklahoma City that was the headquarters of the ATF, the branch of the internal security force that had done this to these people. But the why he was so concerned to begin with is he had thought, like a lot of people, the war in Iraq was unnecessary. It was about oil. Okay, that's what led to the Oklahoma City bombing. Okay, that was completely covered up. They claimed he was a racist. They claimed that they just did the propaganda on that, said that he has something to do. They said he wanted to start a race war. Okay, there was all lies. That person, now. So that's the thing. Now, where's all this coming out of? Well, people say, I don't know. There's all these hate groups in the country, and people. Look, no, people held up swastikas to the internal security forces when they killed an innocent woman in a cabin. That people don't know what conclusion to come to. Timothy McVeigh, he sent overseas. He believes the wars over oil, and certainly as someone in the military is aware of the way in which our ally Israel is using force against innocent people. 70,000 civilians he killed because someone fires throws a grenade into your country. Okay, so that's where all that comes out of. If if anyone knew the explanation for Israel using a force the way it does and threatening to invade Iran, if anyone knew the reason why whoever was in control of the government under Clinton said the internal security forces to burn to death or shoot like dead by shooting in the throat like people who were peaceful, okay, because they were living in rural communities, and this is part of some, instead of going after the right wing, whatever, right? This is where you get hate groups and people holding up swastikas, the internal security forces, and people writing letters saying you must be the agents of Babylon. This is where all this comes from in our country and overseas. When governments behave irrationally and violently without explanation, whether it's here, using the internal security forces, or when Israel does it, people don't know what to think. See, I personally don't know what to think. People come to conclusions. I try to keep an open mind, but you wonder who's in control and what they're doing. And that's where a lot of that comes from. When then it gets called hate groups. Well, hate, you're allowed to hate people for killing innocent people. I wish that, but hey, if governments was, when there's no explanation, you seek one, and that's what happens. People don't hate for no reason, and it may not even be hate, it may be fear and wanting it stopped.